The 344th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Score! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys this evening. A little under 2 hours removed from Carolina's 54-44 win at Virginia, and we're here to talk about it. As Carolina ends a historic losing streak, moves themselves back into first place in the ACC behind a great defensive effort, timely plays made by their veterans, and it all culminated in a big win this afternoon. And so we'll do what we always do when we recap a game. We'll take a look at the box score. You'll hear two quotes from head coach Hubert Davis, and then we'll break down the game, discuss the game, all that, and a whole bunch more. As you can see, Anthony is actually on site at his job working.
Double duty, baby.
But when
Carolina, what are you talking about? It's our job.
When Carolina wins, sometimes work has to share the spotlight to talk about a big win, and that's exactly what happened this afternoon. As I mentioned, Carolina earns a 54-44 win, and that snapped an 8-game losing streak at Virginia. It was the longest such losing streak in a certain venue in the history of the program. It surpassed 7 straight losses at Duke in the mid-1950s. And this has been one that's gotten pretty personal with your host here. I hate Virginia. I despise Tony Bennett. I wanted this one, and I've wanted this streak to end for quite some time. It also happens on the same day that Duke lost at Wake Forest, and now Carolina has a full game lead over the Blue Devils with 4 to play. Of course, both teams will see each other the final weekend of the regular season. I mentioned the 54 points that were scored. That was the same number that Carolina scored their last win at Virginia when they beat the Wahoos 54-52 back in 2012. And this is a game that I think I'm comfortable saying that Carolina controlled from the opening tip. They built a 9-4 lead at the first media timeout, and that really sustained itself the rest of the way. Carolina would lead 26-16 at the half. There was a stretch where Virginia was 1 of 18 and made 1 field goal in a 13-minute stretch. As they would shoot just 28% from the field for the game, 14% from behind the 3-point line. They would threaten in the second half, as you expect they would. They got it to, I think, as little as 5, maybe 4, but they were never able to complete the comeback, and thus Carolina ends the losing streak picks up a win on the road, and they find themselves back in first place with 2 weeks left to go in the regular season.
Yeah, it was a gritty win. It was, kind of what I think we all expected. Like, we thought this was going to be what a win in this game looked like. We were hoping that maybe Carolina's offense would find a little bit of a rhythm at some point, but this is what Virginia does to you. And I think that's the thing that you have to remember, because it wasn't a great offensive performance by any stretch. It's definitely one that, if you're looking at this in probably just about any other game in ACC play, there might be some concerns. But because of how Virginia plays, you knew that there were going to be times where it would be tough on you to score the basketball. RJ Davis did not have his best day. Armando Bacot didn't have his most productive day. And yet you still found a way to win this game because of what you did on the defensive end of the floor. I thought Carolina was absolutely outstanding on the defensive end of the floor. You couldn't have really asked for much more from them when it came to that area, because, let's be honest, this team had not been playing the way that they were playing early on in conference play. And I think now, this is a team that you're hoping hits their stride after that dip in the middle of the season where they weren't defending at the highest of levels. I think they've got a chance to do that. And I think today might be the start of it. I know Virginia is not a great team offensively. I said that to you when we were watching the game, that they really just are not that great of a team when it comes to actually knocking down shots. They've really struggled there throughout the year, and especially at this point of the season. But I thought today, Carolina just did a really good job competing on that end of the floor. They contested just about every shot, especially inside. I said this on Twitter after the game. I think defensively as a team, you played great, but where you really shined were the bigs. That was massive. Those bigs inside did such a great job protecting the brim. They deserve a ton of credit for that. And it feels good to leave with a win, and to do it in the fashion that you did, where you kind of controlled the game throughout.
Look, I said in the preview that for the first time, Carolina is built to win the game in the mud. And they're built to win 60-55, 55-50. Today it's 54-44. Because Carolina tried to speed the game up. Mm-hmm. There's just no speeding up Virginia. They do as great a job as any team, maybe in all of sports, at making you play the way that they want to play. Because they're that well coached, they're that fundamentally sound. But Carolina got 7 fast break points, and after having 4 in the last 3 games combined, and so that number's not large. It's not going to blow you away, but it is significant against Virginia. And those easy buckets are what allow you to win a game like they won today on the road. And so you really got to credit them for realizing that, you're going to hold them to a 1 of 18 stretch. You're not going to put the game away. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, because that is frustrating. But, you look at this from top to bottom, I thought Carolina played as a complete a game as they've played on the road, with, the environment, with the circumstances around the game, and just knowing that, we thought if the game got into the mid to high 60s, low 70s, that would lend to a Carolina victory. But as I mentioned, they could win the game in the 50s, and that's exactly what they did today. Let's take a look at the box score. Carolina shot just 32% from the field. They were 16 of 50. But on the flip side, they held Virginia to just 28% shooting. They were 16 of 58. Carolina was 7 of 22 from 3. That's 32%. Meanwhile, Virginia, they were 2 of 14, just 14% from behind the 3-point line. Free throws, Carolina was 15 of 19 from the foul line, which is a pretty big number against Virginia. That was 79%. Meanwhile, the Virginia just 10 of 15 from the free throw line. That 5-point differential definitely played a role and played a factor in today's outcome. Carolina, we talked about it going into the game. You have to value possessions. You got to limit your turnovers. Carolina with just 10 turnovers today, which led to 11 points for Virginia. On the flip side, 6 Virginia turnovers. That led to 7 points for Carolina. The rebounding, Carolina had a major advantage going into the game, and they didn't dominate the glass, but they did win the rebounding margin, 43-39, 34-28 on the defensive glass. They did get out rebounded 11-9 on the offensive glass. Both teams with 10 second chance points. Carolina's bench did get outscored 10-3, but we'll talk about the bench here in a little bit because Carolina doesn't win the game without the play of their reserves. 22-18 points in the paint went Virginia's way. I mentioned those 7 fast break points in the first half. Carolina ultimately won that category 8-3. The blocks, both teams, contested shots very well, but 10 blocks for Carolina, 7 for Virginia. Ultimately, Carolina assisted on 11 of their 16 made baskets. On the flip side, Virginia assisted on 5 of their 16 made baskets. So with that, we'll now transition to the quote of the game. We got 2 of them for Hubert Davis. He spoke with Jones Angell on the Tar Heel Sports Network after the win, and the first thing he said was, "We found a way to win a game on the road."
That is what was required. One of the things leading up to this game was, whatever it takes on the defensive end to get a stop, get a rebound, defend without fouling, get through screens, whatever it takes on the offensive end to get an open shot, to get to the free throw line, to dominate points in the paint, to execute. It's just whatever it takes. And that's what the guys did. I'm so proud of them to come in this environment against one of the better teams in the country and to be able to play the way that they did and come away with the win. I'm just so happy for them. I'm just so happy for them in this program, and it's just a huge win for us.
Whatever it takes. And that feels like as many times as he said that in that quote there, that was probably said a lot in practice. And guess what? When you got 2 weeks left to go in the regular season, and at the time you were tied for first place in the ACC and you're wanting to win a regular season title, maybe put yourself in a position to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, it's whatever it takes time. And I thought Carolina played with a sense of urgency and a level of desperation that we haven't seen outside of the Duke game. And the Duke game brings it out in you naturally because it's the greatest rivalry in sports. The challenge is getting to that same level of emotion in other games, and Carolina hasn't since that game. There was a play, I believe it was it might have been the first or the second half, where Carolina had turned the ball over, and Virginia had a chance to pick it up and run it down the other end for a layup. And Harrison Ingram dives a significant 10 to 15 feet across the floor to just knock the ball away. Didn't turn the ball back over. Didn't give Carolina possession of the basketball. Didn't do anything other than just give Carolina a chance to set its defense in the half court. And Corey Alexander even pointed it out because that's where we're at. That's the time of the year it is. And we've seen this team be willing to sacrifice their body. We've seen this team be willing to do a lot of great things individually and collectively. I thought that was a sign of Carolina knew what was at stake. They knew what was on the line, and they rose to the occasion. They met the moment, and that's a big reason why they won the game because they did simply whatever it took to make sure they scored more points than Virginia did this afternoon.
Well, yeah, it's the mindset of where you're at in the season, but it's also the mindset that you have to take when you haven't won in a place in 12 years. So I think that was the other area was kind of being drilled into these guys that, hey, do whatever it takes to win because this program has not won here in 12 years. It's very hard to do that. So if you make mistakes, and I said that when we were previewing the game, if you make mistakes in this game, you have to be able to stay calm and find a way to not allow them to compound themselves. Because when they do, that's when you start to get into some trouble. So, and I thought throughout the day, Carolina did a great job of that. Another possession that sticks out to me, this one was in the second half. Carolina, I think it was either that they turned it over or it was just a bad shot. Carolina misses on one end of the floor. RJ Davis comes down, steals the ball away from Virginia at the top of the key, and creates another possession for Carolina. That was what you saw multiple times today. Was there were chances for Virginia to be able to put together some sort of run for themselves, especially in that second half when things weren't falling for you on the offensive end of the floor, and you never let it happen. So this was a team that they had the right mindset going into this game of, look, it is going to be ugly. We know that, but all you have to do is make the important plays. And you saw it as the game got later and later. The offensive rebounds, one possession where Carolina had 4 offensive rebounds on it. They end up going to the free throw line, Armando Bacot does, and ends up turning that into a positive possession after there were multiple chances for that to be a bad shot that eventually turns into Virginia getting the ball going the other way. It's just those little things that Carolina had to do today against this Virginia team, and they were finally able to do it in their place. I don't think that can be understated because people are going to try to undersell this win. I'm telling you right now, especially with Virginia being a team that now is probably going to be seen as a team that's in maybe comfortably in the tournament, but they're going to be the second 4 in, or they're going to be in the last 4 in the tournament field here before too long because of the way they're playing offensively. But for this team, this was a massive win because they knew Virginia was going to throw a lot of different things at them, and they found a way to take care of everything they needed to.
And look, there's no lessening this win, no matter local, national, rivalry media. You win on the road against a team that's going to finish top 4 in the league, that's going to have a double bye in the ACC tournament. That is a NCAA tournament team and has beaten you 8 straight times in their building, and you beat them by double digits. And so you can try as hard as you want. You can't lessen what Carolina did and how important this is. This, from a confidence standpoint, is going to do wonders because now you're 7-2 on the road this season. In a year where top 10 teams go on the road and they lose left and right. And Carolina has been ridiculed for losing at Georgia Tech and losing at Syracuse when other teams and other power conferences have similar type losses. But yet, Carolina is 7-2 on the road. They don't win pretty, but it's not about pretty. It's about winning. And ultimately, if you're a Carolina fan and you're not excited about what this team did today, I don't know what to tell you because this has been as excited as I've been after a win outside of the Duke win. That's how big this is. Mm-hmm. This game means something. You could hear it when Hubert Davis was talking about it, when he mentioned that he'd never won at Virginia since he came back, once he joined the coaching staff. And for a guy that was an assistant for 9 years and a head coach for 3, that's a hard pill to swallow. Speaking of Hubert Davis, another piece of sound I want to play for you guys. If you listen to the press conference takeaways podcast yesterday, we played sound of him talking about them spending the week when working on themselves and getting better defensively. And he talked about how he thought the week off really helped them get back to playing defense the way we grew accustomed to them playing it back in January.
Thought, we talked about having that week off, and I really think what helped us was we got a chance to work on us defensively, and just in terms of tightening the screws that have allowed us for a large part of the season being just a really good defensive team. I thought defensively we were tied together today. I mean, we were really good. We were talking. Our communication was great, and I just thought our defensive effort was really good, and that week off gave us an opportunity to improve and tighten some things that we needed to, and we were able to come away with the win.
The one thing I think you've got to love about Hubert Davis, and this is what makes great coaches great, he's not satisfied with where his team, what this team has done and how they've gotten there. Because for him to spend, a third of his press conference yesterday talking about we need to get better defensively, we need to get better at rebounding when they're the best rebounding team in the league. They're arguably the second best defensive team in the league behind the team they played today. Shows you that he's got the makings of what's going to make him great. because the Coach Smith is the Coach Williams, the Dan Hurleys, those guys are never satisfied. And Hubert Davis is not satisfied. And, we talk so much about the week off being important for this team's legs because they had gotten tired. And that was a big part of it. But also, when you were playing as consistently as Carolina was playing, you're kind of in NBA mode where you're not really practicing. You're basically going through walkthroughs, shoot-arounds, and you're preparing for the opponent. And that's why some of the fundamentals have been laxed, because you weren't able to drill them for 2.5 hours on the fundamentals and make them run if they screw them up. And now you had a week off to really do that. And I don't think it's an accident that after a week off, Carolina commits just 10 turnovers. They don't put the opponent on the foul line as frequently as they had been in recent games, and they win the rebounding margin. All three objects led to them and helped them get a big win today at Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, I said it when we were talking about this game that I thought the week off would probably help them on the defensive end of the floor, because they were not playing the way that they did early in conference play. Like overall, or could they be the second best defensive team in this conference? Yes. What we had seen from them in the previous 6 games, no, they were not. They were not the second best defensive team in the conference. They had definitely, teams had exposed them a little bit. I thought the game against Virginia Tech, I know people were still complaining about that, but I think a lot of that had to do with Armando Bacot's foul trouble was the reason why Carolina wasn't able to defend the way they wanted to in that game. But yeah, I mean, it looked at times like early in the season, especially, the way that teams were able to screen Carolina. And a big part of it, he pointed it out right there. And I thought this, I posted this on Twitter after the first half. I thought that this team defensively was not communicating the way that they were during that start to conference play. It seemed like for some reason that had sort of disappeared. And it's why when Carolina was switching as much as they were, teams were able to get good looks from the perimeter on Carolina. In this game, you didn't see that. Carolina's guards did a great job of switching. And then when they would get beat off the bounce, their bigs were inside protecting at as high a level as we've seen them protect the rim, really since that stretch to start conference play. I thought, Armando Bacot was fantastic when he was on the floor. He looked like the guy that we've seen for most of the year defending inside that just doesn't get enough credit. But the guy that you really have to point to was Jalen Washington in that first half, because we've seen it at times this year. And people could say we're just trying to go after the players. We're trying, that we're not really watching the games the correct way. If you don't watch Jalen Washington inside and realize that he has to improve because he gets pushed around at times, then I don't know what to tell you. But today was a step in the right direction. That's what you want to see from him. And this is a team that lacks the size inside that some of the other teams that Carolina is going to play down the stretch of the season and, of course, into the NCAA tournament do. But I really thought today was an outstanding performance from him. He contested just about everything that went to the rim. He did a great job of going straight up. And I thought even in the air, there's times where some of the big guys that go up against him in the air are able to sort of push him back. You didn't see that today. He did a tremendous job. He deserves a ton of credit. And I think if Carolina can defend this way down the stretch of the season, look, they're not going to hold every opponent to 44 points. There's not going to be many games that you're going to run into where the possessions are going to be this low where that's going to be feasible. But if Carolina can show this type of commitment on that end, can communicate the way that they did today, that could be the difference. With Carolina getting back to being the defensive team that I feel like they probably have to be if they're going to win a national championship.
Stat of the game, I went 3-point shooting. Carolina shot just 32% from behind the 3-point line, but they made 7 threes. Meanwhile, Virginia just 14%, 2 of 14 from 3. Those perimeter makes carried Carolina in the first half and really allowed them to build a cushion that they would never relinquish. Furthermore, I had this in the opening notes, didn't get to it. Carolina has now won 13 straight games when they've allowed fewer than 70 points. 21 straight games when they allow fewer than 70 points, and 21 straight when they give up fewer than 60. So when you see them play defense at at that level, that's championship caliber. You see the results lend towards wins for Carolina, and they got one of those earlier today. Well, we've set the scene. We've given you our initial thoughts, initial takeaways from Carolina's win at Virginia, which snapped a historic losing streak and put the Heels back in first place. Coming up next, we'll give you more thoughts, more takeaways, and get into our discussion topics. But first, Anthony has to tell you about Autograph.
Yes, I do. And guys, do you want to get rewarded for listening to our show or reading our articles? Well, the team at Autograph, co-founded by Tom Brady, has a way that you can do just that. And it's by earning points for the acts of fandom that you take every day, like listening to this show or reading those articles. The Autograph Fandom app gives you access to your favorite UNC content all in one place and offers you rewards like tickets, exclusive merchandise, and more. I told you guys in the last edition of the podcast about how they sent some fans to the game against Virginia Tech. Well, they're wanting to do the same thing for the games against NC State and Duke. So make sure to keep an eye on our social media accounts for that when that comes out. And that's why you want to get the Autograph Fandom Rewarded app. So what you got to do is head over to the Apple App Store and search for Autograph Fandom Rewarded. Download it for free today using the referral code HEELTOUGH. That's HEELTOUGh, all one word. And you can also find the link and code will be in our podcast description as well if you guys want to check that out. So great opportunity there through Autograph for you guys to add to your fandom.
Welcome back inside another live edition of the show, guys. Did want to go over a few comments that we're seeing in the chat here. Andrew Blake says, do you all think this is the most important win to date with Duke losing? We'll actually talk about that when we get to our discussion topic, because I do think this is a pretty big win for Carolina. Thomas Ray says Bacon has to protect himself against those early cheap fouls. I hear you. Also get better officiating, because the second one clearly wasn't a foul. I don't understand how
the first one was horrible. I thought the first one was even worse than the second one, to be honest with you. I didn't. He was going for a rebound and gets called for a foul. Like,
that's part of it. That's going to happen in basketball. I don't understand how we now reward players for tripping over their own 2 feet and calling a foul on the defensive player. Nonetheless, though, when you get the minutes and the production from Jalen Washington, all of that kind of becomes minuscule because it ultimately didn't impact the outcome of the game. So with that, back into our thoughts and takeaways from the win against Virginia. The first thing I have written down is the defense and the rebounding propelled Carolina to the victory. And we kind of talked about it after that Hubert quote about using the week off to get back to where Carolina wanted to get defensively. You hold a team to 1 of 18 stretch shooting in their home gym, a game after where they got blasted by 30 on the road at their arch rival. It wasn't as impressive, because I think we all expected Virginia to respond because that's who they are. That's what they've been under Tony Bennett, is when they get punched in the mouth, they're tough enough to respond. And that wasn't the case this afternoon. They made, I think, their first 2 shots of the game. There was 2 of their first 3. Then after that, they were like Anthony and I on the dating apps. They were cold, and they had nothing working for them. And so, and you combine that with the rebounding, 43-39 isn't overwhelming, but you look at the final 4 minutes when Virginia crept back into the game. It was 47-42 with 2:27 left to play. It very much, wasn't all but a certain Carolina was going to win. You get a big offensive rebound from Bacot that leads to a Harrison Ingram layup that makes it 49-42. And then a sequence later where Ingram misses a free throw, go figure, because he's a 57% foul shooter. And Armando Bacot goes in between 3 Virginia Cavaliers and gets the ball. And, the number isn't overwhelming. They didn't dominate them the way I think that we expected them to. But every time Carolina needed to get a stop, needed to get a rebound, they got it. And that's the hallmark of a championship caliber team. And I've been saying all year long, I think Carolina is capable of that. And they look like one this afternoon.
Well, I mentioned the sequence. I mean, you mentioned the one where Harrison Ingram ends up scoring off of it, but I mentioned the big one for Carolina where they had 3 offensive rebounds in one sequence, creating 4 possessions on one end, one trip down the floor. And that was really the difference. I mean, you look at, the offensive, I mean, defensively, and I thought they did all right on the defensive glass. I know there's few points that Corey Alexander makes that are actually good. But one of the things that he brought up, and he may have actually, I might be giving too much credit to Corey Alexander. It may have been something that Hubert Davis brought up with them, was the defensive rebounding is the area that is concerning at times for Carolina. And you saw it again at certain periods of the game today where Virginia was able to get offensive rebounds, get themselves second chance opportunities. But down the stretch, as you mentioned, Carolina got the rebounds on both ends of the floor. I mean, to have 7 offensive rebounds in the second half, I mean, that is huge for this team. It created so many extra opportunities against a Virginia team that if you can do that, consider yourself very lucky. And I thought that was ultimately the difference in the game. So, yeah, defensively, Carolina did such a great job on that end of the floor, contesting everything and staying in front of guys the way that they should be. But rebounding is another big reason why Carolina ends up getting out of here with the win. And I think it's why Hubert Davis was stressing this so much with his team. Now, look, that's important to Carolina winning every game, but winning a game against Virginia especially, those two things are heightened. You have to be really good in both of those areas. And I thought Carolina was, for the most part today, in both of those areas. And yeah, a ton of credit needs to be given. I mean, Harrison Ingram, again, double-figure rebounds in this game with 10. 8 defensive rebounds were huge. And Armando Bacot with 13 rebounds has the type of game that we expected him to have. But 5 offensive rebounds really stick out for him. So the guys that you needed to showed up on that end of the floor. I think some of us may have thought it would be a little more dominant than it was. But in the end, you got the rebounds that you needed to, which is what's most important.
Yeah, Antoine Ray commented saying, I don't think this Virginia team is like the Virginia teams of past. They literally depend on Reese Beekman and Isaac McNeely to do the bulk of their scoring. And he's not wrong. The thing about the way that Tony Bennett plays is, that's how they have to play. This isn't Virginia from the 80s where they were a national program and they were getting elite talent in the program. Even with them winning a national championship with their style of play, they're not going to attract elite recruits. They're not going to attract elite transfers. But in that stretch where Bennett established his program and then eventually took them to the national title, they had NBA caliber players. Like you had a Joe Harris who's been in the NBA for a decade. Like that title team, Ty Jerome, NBA guy. Kyle Guy has had a lengthy career overseas. DeAndre Hunter's been a big part of what the Hawks have done when the Hawks have won games. They don't have that right now. Like Beekman and Ryan Dunn might be NBA players because they could be 3-and-D guys, but they're not NBA talent in terms of their offensive game. And so the court is compressed. And I thought Carolina did a really good job not allowing either one of them to get comfortable. The way Carolina just contested every shot those guys took was impressive because they did it without fouling, and there was never a shot that they took where they felt comfortable. They never took a shot that got them in rhythm, and it just really looked like what we saw from Carolina back really those first 3 ACC road wins when they won at Pitt, at Clemson, and at NC State that would have basically established them as the team to beat in the ACC. Second takeaway, you got to see how long stuff lasts. 3's a streak. Cormac Ryan's arrived. He entered today 8 of 16 from 3 in his last 2 games. He went 6 of 11 today. So he has stayed hot. Quite literally, Carolina doesn't win the game without his 6 made threes. That was all 6 of his made baskets. He led the team in scoring, and this has been a guy that I've probably been the most critical of from the start of the season to where we are now. Despite him still competing his butt off, still defending, still leading, still doing all the things that makes Hubert Davis rave about him as he did yesterday in his press conference. But I knew deep down he needs to score for this team to get where we want to get to. And it's not a coincidence that Carolina has looked a little bit better on the road, and they're 2-1 in their last 3 games. With him playing the way he's played, where in the last 3 games he scored a combined 52 points and is 14 of 27 from behind the 3-point line. He carried Carolina's offense in the first half, competed defensively in the second half, and it may have taken almost 4 months for the Cormac Ryan we thought to arrive, but it couldn't have come for a better time. Couldn't have come at a better time for Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, look, Carolina, who knows where this game actually ends up if he's not on this team. So for all the people that wanted him kicked off the team after, some struggles that he had during that dip, for people that wanted him out of the starting lineup, I'd like to see where those people are at now. There's a reason why this guy was playing. And one of the things that we talked about so much when we talked about his struggles was that the way that he shoots the ball, there was never a problem with that. The form was there. The decision-making of when to take certain shots was there. It was just that shots weren't falling. And I mean, look, he had moments where he was forcing things a little bit, but we've seen that with just about everybody in the backcourt at this point this season. So I thought today, first half, he wasn't the same guy in the second half, but when you hit 5 threes in the first half and you score 15 of the team's 26 points, you deserve as much credit as anybody for this win. And I think the thing is even in the second half, when he didn't score the ball at nearly as high of a level, he knew that the ball didn't need to be in his hands. He did a good job of sharing the basketball. And most importantly, he stayed engaged on the defensive end of the floor. And that's the thing that you really want to see from these guys, is when you're not getting the basketball, when other guys are, trying to create their offense or to the extent that we saw at times from Carolina. I mean, you saw RJ Davis, did not shoot well at all from the field. There's no doubt about that. But still in the second half, he did a good job of driving the lane and getting to the foul line. That's why he was able to score the way that he was. Armando Bacot, 8 points in the second half. They started looking for him a little bit more. So that was where things were a little bit different, where Cormac didn't have to be the guy. But, yeah, he really set the tone for Carolina today. And I think the thing with him is I know that some people are probably a little bit hesitant to say that he has hit his stride. But the important thing to remember is that the game where everything started getting on track for him was in that game against Syracuse. And I said after that game, the most important thing that happened for him was probably the fact that he didn't get hurt. Because any other time that we've seen him this season have a good shooting game, it always seems to come with him getting his ankle rolled up on. Well, that didn't happen in that game. And what's happened since? This is now 3 straight games of production. So I think for the first time this year, he's actually, I would say fully healthy, but I don't even know if he's that, considering he's rolled those ankles as many times as he has. But he's definitely gotten himself in a little bit of a rhythm and didn't have something that sort of distracted that. So I think you're hoping that this can sort of continue, especially that if he can continue to give you this type of performance from the outside, with RJ starting to settle down a little bit from out there. Elliot Cadeau still being a guy that just, from time to time may be able to knock one down for you. But for the most part, if he's taking shots from the outside, they're not going down. And, Harrison Ingram is just not a guy that's looking for his 3-point shot right now. So it's got to be Cormac Ryan. And, man, it was huge today.
Yeah, you mentioned RJ rough shooting day. 1 of 14 from the field. His school record of consecutive games with multiple made threes came to an end. But we talked about going in, and I talked about, man, I love being old. I don't love getting old individually, but as a sports fan, I love having an older team. And, he got to the foul line 10 times, made winning plays. Armando Bacot, 8 second-half points, was a monster on the glass, made winning plays. Cormac Ryan makes 6 3-pointers on the road, makes winning plays. Harrison Ingram, didn't impact the game offensively, grabs 10 rebounds. Like in a day and time where the game is changing, I think the portal is making it cooler to get older and stay older, and it's a way to do it. And I thought Carolina's experience showed up. It was a big reason why they won this game today. Another reason why they won is the bench. And you look at the box score, you're going to see a combined 3 points from the 5 guys off the bench that played. But you got 6 rebounds from Jalen Washington, 5 rebounds from Jalen Withers, 2 rebounds from Seth Trimble. So 13 bench rebounds on your way to out-rebounding Virginia. And like Jalen Washington did last year, remember last year at Virginia, Armando leaves the game with an injury, and Jalen Washington played out of his mind in that first half. And before just getting exposed in the second half, as you would expect a true freshman on the road would. But in this game, man, Carolina doesn't win the game if he doesn't impact the game the way he did, because they didn't see a loss or a dip in production. He still rebounded. He still defended. He still provided a presence on the offensive side with his ability to get position on the low block. He still did all the things that you want and what you expect to get from Armando Bacot. And then Jalen Withers, a guy who's having a roller coaster season. He's played really, really well, played really, really bad, was semi-benched, if you will, after the Duke win for reasons that probably led to him being late or partying too much after that win over Duke. But he was absolutely phenomenal today. Defended his rear end off and got to the glass and impacted the game. And you had 3 of your bench guys play double-digit minutes. So even though they weren't scoring, you could afford to play them because you weren't getting the results you've gotten before the week off. Before the bye, Carolina, when they went to their bench, it was noticeable that Carolina couldn't play with their reserves outside of Seth Trimble. And that wasn't the case today. And even though Virginia's bench may have scored more points, I thought Carolina's bench impacted the game more than they did. And it's a big reason why they came away with the victory.
Yeah, I mean, look, with Jalen Washington, I think the biggest thing was, the rebounding was there. But when you have 4 blocks and you do it only in 12 minutes of play, that is high-level production on the defensive end of the floor. And that was the thing that I think he did best, was he went up confident. He was able to, affect just about every shot that was going to the rim during that time span. And that was the thing. There's times where when Armando Bacot goes out of the game, you get worried. And again, against a bigger team inside, a more physical team, it might have been a little bit different. But Washington took advantage and did a great job of rotating over. It just, at times, even on the defensive end of the floor, he just doesn't look confident. And I thought today he did. He entered this game, and maybe it does go back to last year's game. I have no idea. That's certainly possible. But it just looked like he was a guy that felt like, I can affect this game. I'm in this game for a reason because I can help my team. And it really showed. With Jalen Withers, the rebounding is the key to Jalen Withers, because he's not a guy that's going to really affect the game offensively. I know he did when he was back at Louisville, but it was because there was simply nobody else and he was a starter. For Carolina, his role, what they need him to be, is a guy that defends at a high level, which I thought he did that today, and a guy that rebounds at a high level when he's on the floor. And to have 5 rebounds in 12 minutes is really, really good. And with Seth Trimble, we know the value that he brings to the table. He's just a guy that does a great job on the defensive end of the floor. Today was no different. He gave Carolina exactly what they needed in that backcourt. And the most telling thing is, if you question the impact that these guys had off the bench because they didn't score, look at the plus minus when these guys were on the floor. Jalen Washington was the lowest at +7. Seth Trimble +10. Jalen Withers +11. When you are having that type of effect on the game coming off the bench, that gives you an extremely impactful group that you can have. The other 2 guys for Carolina that came off the bench, James Okonkwo and Paxson Wojcik, they were not that effective. And I think this is something that has to be pointed out. I think Hubert Davis did a great job to realize we got to get these guys off the floor because this is hurting us. It was late in that first half. It sort of allowed Virginia to gain a little bit of confidence there. And he immediately said, look, I got to go back to Jalen Washington, and I have to put somebody else on the floor for Paxton Wojcik. Those are guys that we've seen at times this year. They play hard, but they just weren't where they needed to be. I mean, James Okonkwo picked up 2 quick fouls. You needed to get those guys out. So great job by Hubert Davis in that moment to adjust and go back to the guys off the bench that he knew he could trust.
Let's now we got 2 discussion topics, and we're running late here, so let's get to them quickly. As great as Carolina played, and then they played great in terms of what this game is and what playing great looks like. They never put the game away. And when you hold a team to 1 field goal in 13 minutes, you probably expect to be up more than 21-8. And probably expect to be up more than 26-16 at halftime. You expect, with the way that you played in the second half, to not find yourself in a 47-42 game with 2.5 minutes left to go. But that was the reality of today. That was exactly what happened. Is Carolina never officially put Virginia away? My question is how concerning is that? Because I think, like, on the surface in the game, I'm sitting there and I'm baffled at the fact that this game isn't out of hand. This game isn't out of reach. But when you step away from the emotion of the game, I look at it and say, Virginia doesn't get blown out very often. That's why what happened on Monday was just so surprising, is because even when they have off nights, they're still there. They had an off night tonight. And as well as Carolina competed and did things well offensively, you're just not going to run them out of the water, especially back-to-back games. And so I don't know how concerning it is, but I think it is something that many Carolina fans were probably going through and wondering, because we haven't been the greatest at closing teams out and closing games out. And had Carolina lost this game, it would have been a hard pill to swallow, considering you had controlled and dominated it from the opening tip.
Well, there you go. You said it right there at the end. The reason why some people are concerned is because it's been the majority of the season that Carolina hasn't been able to do that. And if that's the reason why you're a little bit concerned about this, then okay, you're somewhat justified in that. But I would caution you to look at the fact that this Virginia team, as you mentioned, they don't get blown out often. And they also, that game was on the road. They do not get blown out at home. It doesn't happen. They are one of the most dominant teams in college basketball in their home arena. So for Carolina, from my perspective, I get it. And yeah, it was frustrating because it felt like there were opportunities there that when the game got close late, there was a moment where you said to yourself, when Minor was at the foul line, really? This has a chance to be a 1-possession game when we could have found a way to probably extend the lead and maybe not fully put the game away, but at least be in a more comfortable position. But then you have to remember that not only did you have the fact that Virginia is as good as at home as they are, well, it's also the fact that they're as good as at home against you as they are. So, I mean, I'm not reading that much into it. I also just think at this point, this is kind of what this team is. Could it come back to bite them in the NCAA tournament? Oh, it certainly could. But the thing is I think they've shown us that this is who they are, and they just have to figure out how to win close games down the stretch. You'd like to be able to put opponents away, but again, it goes back to that mindset that Hubert Davis talked about in the press conference. All you have to do, or that was with Jones Angel, but he probably mentioned it in the press conference as well. What you have to do at this point of the season is just find ways to win, whatever it takes to win games. And that's the mindset that this Carolina team has to take. If you get the opportunity to put teams away down the stretch of the year, you have to do it, because there's not going to be teams like Virginia that are going to be as bad offensively at times as they are. But I think for today, it's one where you can kind of say, hey, this is who Virginia is. You knew they were going to fight hard to try to get themselves back in the game and not lose back-to-back. But I'm not really super concerned about it off of this game.
The last thing I want to talk about is the talk going into the game, and it's been this way since it became a streak, is Carolina going to end the streak? How long is this going to continue? And I kind of prefaced yesterday when I said Hubert hasn't been here long enough for this to really be his problem. This was something that started in the Roy Williams era and carried over into him becoming the head coach. But you end the streak on a day where Duke loses. So now you've got a full game lead again in the ACC. We talked about how this result was really going to determine Carolina's path to an ACC regular season title. Your next 3 games are at home against inferior opponents where you should win them all, which means at a minimum, you should enter the regular season finale at Duke already having, a share of an ACC regular season title, a chance to win an outright ACC title. But I got to thinking, as a fan, I wanted this one pretty badly. I get up for every game, but today you could tell that it was 2 weeks left to go, and it was a big time game. It was a good thing I was home alone. I don't think my roommates would have liked to hear some of the things that were being yelled at the television.
The dogs didn't. They were barking most of the time.
So I guess my question is how satisfying of a win is this? Like in the regular season, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say it's behind the 2 regular season wins over Duke, the one at Cameron, the one at home earlier this year. Like postseason NCAA tournament wins are always going to rank higher because they mean more. You're playing in an event that's going to determine a national champion. But in the regular season, outside of the 2 Duke wins, the Tennessee win at home this year was pretty big, was pretty important. You look back at the Michigan win his first year, his first real big game as Carolina's head coach that he won. This one's very high up on the list. And if you're not a believer in Hubert Davis, this is a guy that has done a lot of, first and a lot of historic things as Carolina's head coach. And the latest thing he did was in the longest losing streak in program history. So, I think this is, as significant a regular season win as he's earned away from the 2 wins over Duke.
Yeah, it's got to rank up there, man. If we're doing his career wins, regular season wise, it's pretty high up there. Because you talk about an area where Carolina had just struggled so much. We're talking about some of the ugliest games that you've seen Carolina play in recent memory came in this building. And look, Virginia has had some really good teams over the years. There's no doubt you were listing off some of the guys that they had earlier on the offensive end that were what really made that team what they were early, or towards the middle of the Tony Bennett era. At least in the time that he's been there so far. But it felt like there were opportunities for Carolina to win there, and they just could never get it done. This was another one of those games. And look, Virginia is not playing well right now, but they're still a team that, as we said, could be, I still think they make the NCAA tournament. The thing that sucks is in this conference, the way this conference is viewed, and you've heard it be talked about by pretty much any of the bracketologists and any of the people around the sport. When you lose 2 straight, this is probably going to have this team being talked about on the bubble, which is sad. But this is a tournament team. And so Carolina still knew going in, this was going to be a tough game. And for you to win it, for you to, pretty much keep this team at arm's length for the majority of the way until they cut it to 5 late in that second half, I feel like you have to feel pretty good about this win. And yeah, this is huge for Hubert Davis to be able to snap that streak. The majority of these losses did not come with him as the head coach. And for him to be able to step in and find a way to solve Virginia and end it quickly in his tenure, I think that is huge for Carolina. And it's one that hopefully now will allow Carolina to, make things at least a little bit more even on the road against Virginia, because I get it. Virginia, these last couple of years have not been great for them, but you would imagine that at some point, a guy that is as good of a coach as Tony Bennett is, he's going to eventually find solutions, and they'll be one of the best teams in the ACC year in and year out. That means that you've got to be able to win on the road there. And I think this is a big first step to being able to do that a little bit more consistently in the coming years.
Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Four Corners podcast, guys. Before we let you go, do encourage you, visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Get rewarded for doing so with the Autograph Fandom Reward app. Go back and check out the recap article that I have already posted on the website, going a little bit more in depth on some of the specifics from today's win over Carolina. As Greg Newman points out in the chat, it's a quick turnaround. Carolina back in action on Monday, so it's a quick turnaround for us. I'll be getting you ready for the Miami game with a preview on the website as well. Any news and notes that come out from the Tar Heels, recruiting, NFL draft combine stuff, all that will be posted on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Latest Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. Ask for the podcast, guys. You know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners podcast. We will pop up. We're there. We do encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. Just a heads up, we'll be live again tomorrow on the Heel Tough Blog Facebook page, getting you ready for the Miami game. We're going to go live with the quick turnaround to get you ready for that one. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball season. Well, with that, guys, this is going to wrap up this edition of the show. Thanks to everybody that joined us and commented with us. I want to thank Anthony for hosting. I want to thank you for listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.